We are waiting on one last audio connection. So we're having trouble connecting with Ms. Downard.
Your Honor, is Miss
Usually,
room? She's the guardian ad litem.
not yet.
I see Ms. Downard on the participants and on the screen, so.
As do I, but we don't have an audio connection.
Okay.
Shannon, could you shoot Rebecca a text?
I gotta get my phone.
Oh, okay. Okay, Ms. Downard, can you hear now? Doesn't sound like it. It shows we're connected, but it's not showing an audio connection. One thing I've done in the past when we have this problem, it's often due to a internet speed issue. We can keep her on the screen visually, but I can also
now. Sorry.
Oh, you can now. Wonderful. So we are still waiting for
Yes.
the LGAL. So I won't put us on the record until she appears in the room. We just sent her a quick message.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Shannon, you can put us on the record now.
Okay.
Okay, looks like everyone's on board in the matter of Downard versus Gilman. Could I have each counsel state their appearances for the record?
Evelyn Calagero on behalf of the father, Kevin Gilman.
Mike Kelly on behalf of Ms. Downard.
Rebecca McCluskey, guardian ad litem.
Okay, this is down as a status conference. I'm assuming somebody requested a conference to be scheduled. Looks like it's been a while since the last action took place.
Okay. So I can give the court an update. I technically requested the status conference. Well, actually, before I start, does Mr. Kelly have any preliminary matters? I saw an email that might indicate he does.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly.
Your Honor, I received an email from Ms. Downard on June 1st indicating that my services were no longer necessary, and essentially that we would be parting ways. And those email communication, it feels like the attorney-client relationship has broken down to where it's necessary at this point for me to withdraw from this case. So I would request permission from the court to allow that to occur this morning.
Ms. Downer, do you have any objection to Mr. Kelly withdrawing?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Kelly, I will sign that order and we'll remove you from the hearing.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too.
Okay, so that
Okay.
piece of business is out of the way. Go ahead, Ms. McCluskey.
Thank you, Your Honor. So as a little bit of an update and background to the court, Ms. Downard filed a pro per motion asking for a change in custody for custody and parenting time for both of her sons at the time, Donovan and Taylor. Now Donovan is over the age of 18 and living with Ms. Downard, so it's no longer necessary to entertain Donovan. So we're focusing on Taylor. At the time she filed her pro per motion, I believe she retained Mr. Kelly shortly after. And then at one of the subsequent court proceedings, I was appointed as guardian ad litem. I was not in attendance, but I believe because Mr. Gilman was still unrepresented at that time. Between my preliminary investigation and Mr. Kelly's advice, it became obvious that we didn't believe the court was going to change custody or grant the custody request based only on Ms. Downard's really her sobriety at that time. I know there's an unpublished Court of Appeals case that this court has relied on that states that a parent's sobriety does not meet the burden for a change of custody. So what really happened is we took the evidentiary hearing off, knowing that I was not going to recommend a change in custody. We didn't believe the court would order one. And I really stayed involved to try to just facilitate Ms. Downard's re-engagement with Taylor. The relationship had broken down. She had not seen Taylor in quite some time. So in order to get a good result, that's really why I stayed on to facilitate. I've interviewed Taylor, I've interviewed Donovan, I've met with Ms. Downard. I've spoken to the attorneys at length. I've spoken to Taylor's therapist at length on several occasions. I've had several phone conversations with Taylor. I spoke to Mr. Gilman several times. So I've spent a lot of time in this file trying to help facilitate this re-engagement between Taylor and Ms. Downard. So what happened recently, we kind of wanted some feedback from the court on how we should proceed. After my investigation and all of my interviews, I do believe it would be appropriate and safe for Taylor and Ms. Downard to begin contact. What I had suggested recently was maybe phone contact to begin with, if Taylor felt comfortable with that, possibly a meeting, maybe having lunch at a restaurant, if that's possible in the next couple of weeks, with Mr. Gilman somewhere present, of course. Every time I've spoken with Taylor, both in person and over the phone, he seems very open to this. He does not seem resistant to me. And I'm very careful about how I approach this because I want Taylor to feel comfortable because there's not been contact for a few years. Mr. Gilman, I must say, also seems very open to facilitating this. From my conversations with Ms. Colville, who is Taylor's therapist, every time I speak with Taylor and he seems very open to beginning contact with his mother, somehow he goes back to Ms. Colville and everything goes in reverse. I don't believe Ms. Colville is able to neutrally facilitate this re-engagement at this point. I understand she's got a long-standing relationship with Taylor and she's very protective. From my conversations with her, I think she has some strong negative feelings about Ms. Downard, just her past. So I think that is coming into play here. And quite frankly, I think she may be blocking this progress. From all of my, I spoke with Taylor recently about maybe starting with a phone call. If he felt comfortable proceeding to the lunch or the first meeting that I had spoken about, supervised by Mr. Gilman. Mr. Gilman was very open to that. They gave me their home phone number. And then a few days later, we hear from Ms. Calogero, I believe, and Ms. Colville that Taylor felt pressured. That got under my skin a little because there was zero pressure on that phone call. I was very, very specific about how I spoke to Taylor and asked for his feedback and if he felt comfortable and what he needed. I think the child is being influenced. to not have contact with Ms. Downard. That's my personal feeling. Maybe Taylor's a great actor, maybe Mr. Gilman's a great actor, but when I speak to them, they seem very open to this re-engagement at an appropriate pace. Taylor's 16, so why I stayed involved because I realized I could issue an opinion and say, this needs to happen. And if the child doesn't have support, it's not going to happen because he's 16 and we can't physically make him have contact with his mother. However, I very much believe it would be in his best interest. I always believe it's in a child's best interest to have a healthy relationship with both parents. I have spoken to Ms. Downard many occasions at length. I very much believe she's safe and appropriate. She's been sober for, I believe, more than 2 years now, gainfully employed. She is engaged to what sounds like a very stable, appropriate man. They own a home. She's maintained this stability for over 2 years now. And I do believe that she would be safe for Taylor. And Taylor has the support of a counselor if things don't go well. So that's kind of where we're at. Maybe the feedback I'm asking for from the court is if I were to recommend either just by this verbal update or through a written recommendation that reflects the same, would the court be inclined to sign an order just stating that one phone call needs to happen? If that goes well, then a meeting should happen, supervised as appropriate, and then proceed from there. Or would the court prefer to set this for an evidentiary hearing and hear from the parties and hear from Taylor's counselor?
Well, with a 16-year-old child, under these circumstances, I would typically leave it up to the child, depending on what the circumstances are. If he wants to see mom and reestablish a relationship, absolutely, I would support that. The thing that gives me pause is we've got a therapist that's actually discouraging from doing that. I would want to know why the therapist feels that way. Again, we're talking about a 16-year-old child. We're not talking about a 4-year-old. And what kind of awful trauma did Taylor experience that a therapist would think it would be unhealthy for him to see his mother? I need to understand that.
Your
So
Honor,
Ms. Calogero, please, I was just about to ask you.
I was just going to ask to fill in a few things. The original custody order recognized that Ms. Downard needed to participate in substance abuse treatment and successfully complete that, and that complete recovery court. And throughout this, Taylor has felt uncomfortable without any proof, documentary proof, that his mother has completed the things that the court asked of her, so that he would like to know that she has had a sustained sobriety, employment or income verification, some sort of stable home. The last time we were at a child support review hearing, Ms. Downard said she was not employed, she was painting, and I guess being paid without a regular paycheck. And there is there's a bench warrant out for Ms. Downard's arrest at this point, as of, I believe.
Your Honor.
It's
Well, hold on. We'll give you a
as
chance.
of April 21st, 2020, there's a bench warrant out for Ms. Downard's arrest for non-payment of child support. She had at one hearing promised to pay a certain amount beginning in January 2020 and never made those payments So I
What-
can
Let me stop you. What does that have to do with the child having contact with his mother?
those are part of Taylor's concerns regarding the contact with his mother and her stability. Apparently, as a child, things were very unstable in that household. There was substance abuse. There were various sexual liaisons going on that the children were aware of, and that's where Taylor's hesitation comes in. He'd like to have a relationship with his mother, but he wants to be reassured that she is stable and that the vitriol won't continue.
So I can understand that to live with her, he would want those kind of assurances, but to have a phone call or to meet in a restaurant, that I don't understand.
Yeah, those were the things that he was requesting through the therapist.
Your Honor.
Hold on, Ms. Downard.
To receive confirmation of that, and he would then be open to starting slowly on a relationship with his mother. And I've spoken with Mr. Gilman and his wife, and they support that.
Your Honor, if I could speak to that really quickly, this is another reason I was a little suspicious of the counselor. There was a little miscommunication. So Taylor began requesting this documentation, which I also found a little strange. It didn't sound like something that would come from a child. I'm concerned that he knows about the bench warrant. I can't imagine him getting on D12 and finding that info himself. So an adult must have passed that information along. So the therapist, Ms. Colville, did ask me for this documentation. Mr. Kelly and I spoke about it. And it was my understanding Ms. Colville was going to contact Ms. Downard directly, and they would facilitate whatever she could pass along, and they would set up a meeting between the three of them, because that was the first intent. Somehow that never happened, and Ms. Colville kept saying she was waiting for Ms. Downard to give the information to Mr. Kelly, to give it to me, to give it to Taylor. And I thought that was a little bit of a delay tactic. So just to speak to that, and my instinct was the same. Why would a child, because he still is a minor, need pay stubs and utility bills to have a phone call and a meeting with his mother? And I did indicate to Taylor that I had spoken to his mother on many occasions, his mother's attorney. I'd done my research, and I felt comfortable as his attorney that she would be safe and appropriate, and that she was being truthful about her stability. Thank you.
Again, we're not talking about him moving back in with mom yet. We're simply talking about him having a phone call with her. When's the last time there was any contact between the two of them?
It's been 4 years.
4 years.
4 years he hasn't let me talk to him.
There was a phone call recently, within the last.
There has not been no phone call. I tried to call him, Your Honor, 3 times, like Ms. McCluskey said, that he was ready to talk to me. And then 3 days later, I get an email from Sarah stating that Taylor needed these documentations first, and I was blocked from calling. And I haven't been able to talk to him at all. His brother has been able to talk to him and has told me that he felt like it was the therapist and the attorney as well trying to stop this from happening, that Taylor wanted to talk to me, but he was being coerced into saying different things because they're trying to block my rebuilding my relationship with my son. And so throughout this whole thing, it has been the therapist who has stopped me from doing everything. Ms. Colville had sent me an email stating that she was waiting on Ms. McCluskey to provide her the stuff. I sent Sarah back an email, told her that I would provide the stuff for her, just let me know what she needed. And then I never heard from her until just when I tried to call Taylor after Ms. McCluskey had talked to Taylor and they agreed to get phone calls going. And then she sent an email stating Taylor wanted to see these documents again. Mr. Kelly has these documents. I completed rehab. I completed parenting classes. I completed anger management classes. I have been sober now for over 2 years. I have a wonderful man who stuck by my side through all that. Luckily, I don't have to work right now. He makes, good enough money for me to sit home and take care of my children and be there for my children. And we also have taken on an infant that has come from my sister's home that we are taking care of. We've had her every day, since she's been 3 weeks old. I am a stay-at-home mom right now. Due to my felony drunk driving, I cannot get employed through anything that involves any vulnerable people. So I've kind of stepped back to take care of that, try to get the felony wiped off my record so I can begin working again. But again, like I said, I am.
Let me stop you, ma'am. So Donovan is staying at your home now?
Yes, Donovan's in the other room right now.
What's the relationship between Donovan and Taylor?
They had never been apart until Donovan ran away from Kevin when he was 17. He is now 19. And Taylor, if you look at Taylor's school records, even Mr. Gilman's wife told the school that Taylor had started acting out because Donovan had ran away from Kevin's and came to live with me. They have never been apart this long, and Kevin has not allowed him to talk to him.
You're not answering my question. What I asked you was, what is the relationship between Donovan and Taylor? Do they talk? Are they on friendly terms? Do they see each other?
Mr. Gilman just allowed Donovan to see Taylor, I believe, last week. He doesn't have a phone, so we can communicate with him, nothing.
So for the last year, there's been no contact between these brothers?
No, Mr. Gilman would not allow it.
All right, well, the reason I'm asking this is if there is some kind of a relationship still between the brothers, despite the interference, could Donovan be enlisted to encourage Taylor? Hey, talk to mom. And would he do that? And would Taylor respond to that?
Yes, Donovan has actually, sorry, Your Honor. Donovan has actually tried to talk to Taylor.
So has that been explored at all? Ms. McCluskey, have you explored that at all?
I did actually. When I spoke to, I believe it was a conversation with Ms. Downard, I'd asked if I could facilitate it, if Donovan could be the one to supervise a visit. Because I didn't realize that Taylor, obviously he's not able to take driver's training. We didn't know where that was because quite frankly, if there is anyone blocking this and Taylor could drive, he certainly can choose to see his mom on his own. So I did explore that a little, but with Taylor not having his own phone, again, I've never gotten the impression that Mr. Gilman was really the one who was blocking this, but he certainly is not allowing Taylor to have his own phone at 16 so he can speak to his mother or his brother. So it's a little bit difficult with him being so isolated.
Donovan and Taylor did have a recent visit at the end of May. And Donovan had told his parents that he appreciated that they were not pushing him or pressuring him to come around if he wasn't ready. And apparently Donovan had mentioned that Ms. Downard was filling his head with a bunch of stuff that was bad about the Gilmans. And they told Donovan that they want to have a relationship with him, but they didn't want to pressure him into that and push him if he wasn't ready. And he said that he really appreciated that. He could see that it's not the Gilmans, but he said that even as parents, he sees that they have grown since he lived there. So he wants to build a relationship with Taylor. I believe that Taylor wants to have a relationship with Donovan. Taylor just needs some sort of reassurance that Ms. Downard is safe. Now, if Mr. Kelly has all those documents, I don't know why he did not pass them on to Ms. McCluskey or Ms. Colville or myself so that we could get all of this started.
Your Honor,
All right, well,
Donovan,
I'm prepared to rule. I'm going to order that there be a gradual reintroduction between Taylor and his mother, beginning with phone calls and supervised visits and progressing from there at a pace that Taylor is comfortable with. In your conversations with Taylor, if he's asking for things, give them whatever. Obviously, the last thing you should be doing is saying anything ill of his father or stepmother. They need to be out of the equation. The goal here is to reestablish communication with your son.
and I agree, Your
So-
Honor, and Donovan had sent me the copy of his message with his father and Angie. And I would just like for Mr. Gilman's attorney to show proof that Donovan had said that, because Donovan's laying in the next room and he can gladly come in here and tell you that he never talked to Kevin and Angie like that, that he told me and that he sent me the copies of the text messages to Mr. Gilman. And I will provide anything to see my son. I just want to see my son. I don't want to take him from his home right now. I just want to see him.
And obviously Taylor needs to understand that I am not going to be granting a change of custody. That's not going to happen.
I agree.
All I want to do is to try to rebuild his relationship with his mother. And it
I
appears
agree.
that she is ready for that. And I think he probably is. I am bothered that his therapist is taking such an aggressive approach. I wonder how much good this therapist is actually doing.
Well,
Sounds like
I'm-
the therapist may be doing harm.
I'm not particularly feeling the same about the therapist. I've seen her letters that she's written for these reviews, and she knows Taylor and recognizes that he needs to feel safe. And that's been the topic the entire time. So, like I said, if Ms. Downard had provided all those documents to her attorney, we never got them. So we've got that issue at this point.
Well, that's why I fired him.
My concern is, I agree with Ms. McCluskey, those aren't the kinds of things that a 16-year-old would be asking for. Those are the kinds of things a lawyer would ask for. And maybe a therapist? I don't know. But those aren't the kinds of things you'd be asking for, simply to have a phone call or meet at a restaurant. That doesn't make sense.
That's been the stance ever since I was retained. I was not the one that was pushing for the paperwork. I was going by what the therapist and Taylor were expressing. So
So ma'am,
like I said,
I'm
the
assuming,
Gilmans are
Ms. Downer,
fine.
Ms. Downer, did you successfully graduate from recovery court?
I did not successfully graduate from recovery court. I did successfully complete rehab. And I have not been in trouble with the law in a while. I do not have a bench warrant. I did get that taken care of. Mr. Kelly was aware.
I'm not worried about a bench warrant for child support. That's
Well, it's already
not my
paid,
concern.
Well, that is paid, and they're taking it out of my unemployment, my child support out of my unemployment. So,
So when did you complete rehab?
I completed rehab back, I believe it was 2017, July of 2017.
Did you get some kind of a certificate for that?
Yes, sir, I did, and I provided it to Mr. Kelly, along with my certificate for parenting and anger management.
Ms. McCluskey, do you have those items?
I don't, but I could request them from Mr. Kelly, no problem.
Why don't we pass those along? I mean, if that helps, let's do that. But I'm ordering that the reintroduction begin with phone calls, and I want that to start immediately. With phone calls and with supervised visits, and from there, it will progress at a pace that Taylor's comfortable with. I would encourage Donovan to be involved in the process.
And he will.
But it can't be attacking dad or stepmom. It's got to be positive.
I agree,
And
Your
that's
Honor,
the
and
only way it's going to work.
I agree.
Ms. McCluskey,
And-
I would normally ask Mr. Kelly to prepare this document. Would you be opposed to that?
No, I was just going to offer, I made a detailed note, so I'm happy to prepare the proposed order. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Good luck. I hope this works. I think
Thank
it
you
will.
so much,
It just
Your Honor.
needs to be gradual.
And
All
I
right, have a
agree.
good day, everyone.
Thank you,
You
Your
too.
Honor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.